Welcome to the Wednesday, February 15th edition of the PFF Forecast. It's the day after Valentine's Day, but my one true love is joining the podcast today, and that's Seth Galina, so we're thankful for that. We're going to talk a little bit about his takeaways from the Super Bowl and ask him if Jalen Hurts is the second coming of Jesus Christ, how worried the Cardinals should be about hiring a coach who got cooked on Sunday, and we're also going to talk some free agency with Seth. And Brad, of course, as usual. And then at the end, we're going to do a little update on draft props with Arjun. So it's going to be a great show. Let's rock. Seth, that's quite an intro for you. Congratulations.
First of all, not just Valentine's Day, but my mom's birthday, February 14th,
Wow.
1954. So let's get that out of the way. I'll send you guys her address after. You can send her gifts. You know, we're good.
Party sandwiches.
Party sandwiches, yeah.
The reason I brought it up is because I didn't get a chance to talk about how big of a pet peeve Valentine's Day is for me. I hate this made-up holiday. I think it's stupid. I'm jealous. You always get to mention pet peeves, and I didn't remember that last time.
It's a made-up holiday, but if people are enjoying it, then I say let them enjoy it. Though I do feel kind of mostly I do take your side on the matter, though.
I would say another, I know I had a great tip last week that shocked a lot of people and weirded a lot of people out about how to watch a football game in a crowd. But I think a better tip for this one is, look, if Valentine's Day, if you're going to have to participate and you're going to have to get a gift, why are men not receiving gifts as well? I mean, no one said Valentine's Day is a one-way street. That's all I'm saying.
I'll say this, though. If you're a man and you're giving a gift and you're not receiving one, that's on you. Look in the mirror. Okay. Maybe you need to figure some things out. That's all I'd say. Okay. That was the end of our Valentine's Day assessment and advice. Let's talk a little bit about the Super Bowl from your perspective, Seth, because you do a better job of breaking down scheme and preparing us for what we're going to see in the games better than anyone else. And so now looking back on that game, there were so many interesting components to it, but what did you find most interesting? What was your biggest takeaway?
I mean, there's so many takeaways. I'll start. If we just start on the Chiefs, when the Chiefs had the ball, and I look at the Eagles defense, which had a lot of good moments this year and was probably a really good defense overall. But I look at the same thing that kind of gave them problems the whole year. And it's like their play from the nose, and they tried to fix it, drafting Jordan Davis. They tried to fix it, signing Linval Joseph, signing Ndamukong Suh, and it just wasn't good enough. And that really was like a big deal. If you're going to play with a nose tackle, a player who's literally lined up right on top of the center, he's got to be able to win one-on-ones. And they could not win one-on-ones. And you saw that hurt them in the run game. Like you're playing with these fronts, you're playing with 5 defensive linemen and a linebacker, and sometimes a safety would come down, and you just can't be giving up these type of runs time and time again. And even in the pass game, like they couldn't really get a pass rush from those guys. Jordan Davis made like one play where Mahomes kind of ran near him, and then Mahomes still was able to get the ball off to Kelsey on that play. So that to me was the idea here. It was like, well, you're going to play with these light boxes. That nose guy's got to be pretty good. Or you got to have Aaron Donald, as a 3 technique, and they just don't have that. Even though Javon Hargraves had a great season this year, so that to me was a takeaway. Like the Chiefs are really able to run the football better than I probably thought they would. I mean, I know it's a good offensive line, but probably better than they thought they would. And then I think in the passing game, it's really just like Andy Reid found the fish, right? And the fish was Avonte Maddox in the second half, which is just like everything was designed to go after Avonte Maddox. Not just with Kelsey, not just with other players, if whoever they could find to play against Avonte Maddox. And like the passing game has been great all year for the Chiefs. I'm not surprised that they were able to do this. So I think on that side of the ball, those are my takeaways. And I think on the Eagles, who obviously deserved to win the football game based on how good their offense was, it's the same thing as always. Surprising that they couldn't run the ball as well. Miles Sanders not having a great day. I know he's probably like an average running back, but like behind that offensive line, he's always looked really good. Not being able to do anything. And then Jalen Hurts is like the one little, like, I'll spray a little or like a little bit of water, put a little bit of water on the Jalen Hurts performance, and that this has been the Jalen Hurts performance that we've seen before in his 2 years starting, which is like a lot of throws to the outside. And when he's been accurate on those throws, you're like, oh my God, like we saw in the Super Bowl. Now, this is probably the best one he's ever played, but these are all throws to the outside. And maybe that's going to be good enough for a long time. I'm just curious to see what that looks like when everything else isn't great, when the receivers aren't great, when the offensive line isn't great. But other than that, like I said, it is a great performance. Like, there's no doubt about it. I'm just curious what it looks like outside of like when you isolate who Jalen Hurts is.
So many follow-ups to that, great answer. The first one was just, you're talking about, of course, the Eagles use a lot of 5-man fronts. You don't want to just go away from what you do, especially in the Super Bowl, but kind of, have you had experience with a bad playing surface? And like, do you think maybe you almost make personnel adjustments to where you say, like, do we even want 5 defensive linemen on the field if they can't even, get upfield? So I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always tough to just be in the middle of the game, because I'm sure they, I think on the broadcast they talked about Jalen Hurts changing his cleats. So like clearly they tried stuff. So it's tough to be like, okay, well, we're just going to stop, like, because you're like, okay, well, what's our first answer? Our first answer is change the cleats. And that's like, and it's not like, well, we change the cleats and we go out on the field and we slip the first play we're out there and we go to our next answer. It's like, well, it maybe not happen. Maybe they didn't slip for the next 10 plays that they were on the field, and they slipped once and they didn't slip again for 5 plays. So it's like tough to like really be like, okay, we're going to change everything we do because of the surface. Now, I will say about the surface, I do think it sucks. And I'm not saying like, oh, the Eagles would have won or the game would have been different. It just sucks that everyone was slipping, man. And you can again, it's like I've seen people talk about like the pass rushers slipping, and it's like, well, it happened after they were kind of getting beat by the offensive tackle and whatever. And that's all true. It just does suck that the playing surface should not be like that. That's period, right? It should never have come to this. So I think it sucks. I'm not going to say like a conspiracy theory, whatever, but it does suck. But yeah, just to answer your question, it's tough to change what you're doing based on that. And clearly they did what they could with the cleats, something we talked about maybe the Bills should have done a few weeks ago. Yeah, I don't think that's a tough one to just be like, all right, we'll change what we're doing because like because Javon Hargrave slipped a couple times,
Both teams actually played on the same field. I can confirm. So just so that we're clear, I have a hard time with anyone who's complaining about the playing surface and being like, oh, that was the problem. It's like the Eagles defense gave up points and yards to every decent offense that they played. Okay. The problem that they had was they looked like they'd never seen motion before, Seth. It had nothing to do with slipping is secondary to the fact that you're totally unprepared when a guy moves before the snap. Anyways, that's my rant. Brad, you can continue with your question.
That's a perfect segue. So on that point, so obviously there's the 2 touchdowns where they're walk-in touchdowns for Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. Eric Bieniemy comes out of the game, identified in the Eagles game against the Jaguars that their responsibilities in those motion situations, the outside corner is supposed to switch over to number 2 receiver, yada yada yada. To a certain point, I get that it's probably Jonathan Gannon's fault, but is there also like, on the Kadarius Toney one, both corners went inside. Like, is there also an issue of just like eye discipline and just like figuring things out, or is it really just, hey, I have my keys, I have my role, and I'm not supposed to just kind of freelance off of that?
Yeah, it's tough because like you just get to the point where it's like, okay, this is how we're going to play it, and like basically both were kind of man coverage principles. Now sometimes you have the guy who's literally in man coverage on the motion guy, and he's going to run with him no matter where he goes. And then there's the one where the man coverage guy will go to safety and the safety will come down, but it still ends up being the same kind of idea. Now, the opposite is you just bump everyone over. So everyone stays on that same second line. And okay, my guy went in motion. Now I become the next guy in line, and everyone kind of bumps over, and that's how you can deal with that. But then there are issues there. Like there's no right answer, right, to how you play defense based on motion and stuff like that. It's based on the team, and clearly this is what they had decided to do, and they got burned a couple times. I think couple things. I think it's a little overblown just because like they were at the 5-yard line both times. Like they were in scoring position. Yes, it looks bad that it happened twice in the Super Bowl that everyone's watching, but we can remember this for years. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Jalen Ramsey getting having that issue versus Devontae Adams in Green Bay, like in 2020 in a playoff game. Like this happens all the time. This happens absolutely all the time because you're on the goal line. And you got to make these decisions, right? And we're going to run with people, and we're just going to live in that world. Like, hey, we're going to run, and we're trying not to be out leveraged in that way. And they got caught a couple times. There's just more, I think, like I said, because they were already on the 5-yard line. I think the more interesting thing is, okay, how did you get to the 5-yard line? Yeah. Now, obviously, one of them is a punt return, I believe, but like really, the question is like, how did you get to the 5-yard line? And then I guess the next question is, okay, well, why are you? Is this what you've done the whole year? You only have one answer to it. Probably, if that's the case, you probably need more than one answer to motion on the goal line. I would bet they do have more than one answer, and they just got caught in this game, and they got caught in a game, against the Jaguars or whatever the story is, but. Yeah, like I said, I think it's more about how did you get to the 5-yard line than what you did when you got there.
Amazingly, I thought, one of the big things that I took away from this was how obvious it was that the Eagles had the best athletes on the field, and yet that it didn't really matter. So, you have, I guess, Kadarius Toney's a great athlete, but like Juju Smith-Schuster comes alive in the second half. Travis Kelce's a great athlete, but he's not AJ Brown out here, right? Like AJ Brown was clearly the best athlete when he was, on that side of the field. And yet what it really underscored to me was how successful the Chiefs have been at generating a ton of offense. And in a large part, it seems like because no one really knows what to expect. If you expect Travis Kelce, but because of the rest of the players, like you just never really know where he's going to be, what he's going to do, and who else might get targeted. Is there truth to that statement? I think it's an easy thing to say in hindsight. Oh, they traded Tyreek Hill and their offense was amazing, and it, in many respects got better. Are you buying that, or were there just structural changes that they've made? Mahomes has been better. His brother stopped doing TikToks, like whatever it is, that have caused this, because it was ridiculous. People were wide open all the time.
Yeah, I to me it's a lot of it on Mahomes. I think he's evolved into this player that can really get the ball out quickly, especially on like quick game stuff. And you saw like a lot of plays where like he didn't want to wait for something down the field, and he just got the ball out there. They got 6 yards, and they can do it again. And he's getting to that point. I always use this analogy because watching Drew Brees for so long, everyone wants to say like, oh, well, if we don't have a strong arm quarterback, and this is not Mahomes, obviously, but if we don't have a strong arm quarterback, then we'll just run quick stuff, and we'll throw slants, and we'll do that. And it's like, okay, you can do that, but you're not going to hit at 90% like Drew Brees did. Like everyone's like, oh, we'll just do that. We'll just, we'll do that. Like Brees hits it at 90%, and he puts the ball accurately so you can get yards after catch. Like no one else does that. And I think Mahomes now is beginning to get into that. Now he's always been a genius, of course. That's why he's won so many games. But I think after the middle of last season, where they didn't look so good against, I think it's the Titans in the middle of last year. I think there's another one that they didn't look so good against. I think the Giants on like a Monday night where they won, but it wasn't great. I think you were like wondering how they could evolve, and especially without Tyreek Hill. I think if Tyreek Hill's still there, you can find other ways to be explosive, to be able to move the chains. But without Tyreek Hill, you're like, how are they going to evolve? And I think if Mahomes, and obviously Andy Reid is part of this as well, but like Mahomes just like taking the easy stuff, not worrying about anything else, and then I'll just do it again. And that's what I'm saying. Like with Breeze, it was like, okay, you want a 4-yard gain. Well, I'll just do another 4-yard gain. I'll do another 7-yard gain because I can do that because I'm Drew Brees. And Mahomes is doing that now. Like I'll just take a 6-yard gain. I'll do it again. And then obviously you have the ability down the field to create explosive plays. But that wasn't their offense this year. I mean, Mahomes was like top of the league in terms of like percentage of his yards that came after the catch. Like there was a lot of yak in this offense for the first time really ever. Basically outside of Travis Kelce, so who's always a yak guy. But that's to me where Mahomes has been. You kind of knew it was going to happen because you would watch them be this. I always say this about Mahomes, where it's like, yeah, I know the plays, the highlight tape plays where he's throwing he's closing his eyes and he's throwing it, then he's no look and he's throwing it behind his back and he's making all these plays outside the pocket. That's the stuff we love to see in the highlights, and it's partly what makes him what he is. He's a genius. He's like literally a genius in the pocket, and we're seeing it come out in different ways now. He was really good at like eye manipulation and stuff early in his career, and we see that a little less now. But really, he's just like, I know where the route is right now. I know it's open before it happens. And he had talked about that I think last season or last offseason, maybe 2 off seasons ago, where he was like, hey, I didn't really know anything about defense. It's a little vague, but you're seeing kind of the fruits of the labor here, where it's like, man, I just know where I'm going before everyone else does, because my process information at such a fast level. So I do think a lot of this is just Mahomes. They don't have bad receivers. They have a bunch of like mid receivers plus Kelce, and Mahomes just makes them all look amazing.
I got one last question for you. I think it's sort of tied to that a little bit. So you mentioned before Jalen Hurts, kind of how, a lot of his great games are when he's hitting some of those balls outside the numbers, and the bad ones are not. The Chiefs, interestingly, have used a day 2 pick on an off-ball linebacker 3 drafts in a row now. And I think all of them had pretty significant impact on this game. Is that a great matchup counter to a team that is, playing bully ball and doing the things we saw them do, where you have 3 off-ball linebackers you can trust, not great in coverage, but are sound in their run fits and can take away the middle of the field enough? Was that kind of like a good matchup in their favor in this game?
I think it's okay. I think it just depends. Like, I do think those players are good. You're talking about like Bolton and Gay and Chanel, I guess, from this past season. The interesting thing is it does, like, if you wanted to play the game where you say, okay, well, they have 2 great outside receivers. We can't just play one-on-one. We have to keep 2 safeties high. And then you just need the guys who are so good in space. And I don't think those guys, so I think it's like, as a process, I think it's probably the right move to think about the middle of the field, the spine, right? Like nose tackles, 3 techs. I mean, 3 techs already were important, but like nose tackles and, middle linebackers, will linebackers, box linebackers are going to become more important. And we just see, like, I always go back to the 49ers defense. I mean, that thing only works because of Fred Warner. And Dre Greenlaw to a certain extent, who's a really underrated player, but like it really works with Fred Warner being able to take away swaths of the field that no other player can. It's just hard to find those guys. So like the process is right. Maybe spending some day 2 picks, an athletic guy who maybe isn't great against the run, and maybe we'll figure it out later. So I think the process is probably right. It's just hard to find those guys. Like there's just not a lot. There's like 5 good ones, right? Hard position to play. Really hard position to play. Not to get too off Super Bowl talk here, but just thinking about this recently. But one of the reasons why it's so hard to play is because everything is happening behind your head. Maybe I said this on the podcast before, I don't remember, but playing linebacker in coverage is having eyes behind your head, right? Because like when you're playing corner, everything's happening in front of you. I have the receiver. If I'm man coverage, it's in front of me. If I'm playing, a deep third zone, it's in front of me. Even cover 2, I'm seeing everything in front of me because my hips are inside. With linebackers and the inside players, man, like you got to just feel stuff. You got to have this instinct to understand which routes are coming. And I don't see them, but I'm going to move 2 steps this way to cover it because I'm assuming it's coming and all that stuff. That's why it's so difficult. That's why Fred Warner is so valuable, and Demario Davis and all these guys.
Linebacker talk, what people tune in to the forecast to get. If you want more draft analysis, by the way, head to pff.com and get the just released PFF Draft Guide. It's brand new, ton of new features. It looks super, super sick. It's the best one that we've ever done. That's why we waited a little bit longer to put it out this year to make sure it was the best quality. You can get it at pff.com for a ridiculously low price. When you subscribe, you'll also get access to Brad's contract projections and free agency rankings. He is too humble to say this, but I will just let it be known that every single team in the league uses these and has them up on their screens constantly. You will not find anyone that does a better job of projecting these numbers and doing the research there. So kill two birds with one stone, get yourself ready for the off season. And of course, when you buy a year-long subscription to PFF Plus, you're going to get all of the fantasy and betting analysis that you need next season as well. So it's a great time to make that dive if you have not, and as well, a great time to join the PFF printing press, the PFF Forecast Discord. We're going to talk about draft props here in a second. We're also going to talk about some free agency stuff, and you're going to get up to the minute ways to profit off of those things in the Discord. It's gonna be hard for us to let you know when we find something about a player that might get drafted earlier, and for you to be able to go get some money down. So you'll want to join that so that you can be on the cutting edge. The link to the Discord is in the description. Also, if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're used to watching on YouTube, we have our own YouTube channel now, which is awesome. It's just the PFF Forecast all the time, and you won't have to go hunting for all the videos. You can get them right there, just with one simple subscription. So if that's what you're looking for, go to YouTube and search PFF Forecast, and you'll find that new channel. Okay, let's talk a little free agency. In fact, I actually want to get into it in a way by asking about someone who's not a free agent who played in the Super Bowl. A very quick answer from you, Brad, first. What does Jalen Hurts' contract look like? And then from you, Seth, like, he was great in the Super Bowl. You poured a little water on the fire. It seemed like there were some guys open over the middle, particularly on that play before the fourth down where they decided to punt. And so that there's some questions there. But, after Brad gives you what he thinks, like, curious here, do you think it's worth it?
Yeah, I think we're looking at something in the neighborhood of 4 years, 200 million, maybe a little bit below that. But I mean, he's going to get into that 50 million per year conversation. And I'll pass up to you, Seth. But it's interesting you mentioned that, because I actually had a conversation with someone else who had a similar kind of like, yes, he played great, but there are some things you can watch that tape and take away and have some concerns and poke some holes in. But anyway, I think it's in that neighborhood of $50 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to happen. Whether I think it should or not, it's going to happen, because you don't like, at this point, he's been to the Super Bowl, All Pro, the whole thing, so it's going to happen. I think the good thing about where Jalen Hurts is with his development is because they've won games with him, he gets to continue to play quarterback, and he gets a lot of reps, and he can develop. Like that, I always think about that with Josh Allen in a sense. Josh Allen was not good for his first 2 years in the league, right? But because he was a first-round pick, and we got picked 9th or 7th or whatever it was, he gets to continue to play that basically anywhere else, any other draft slot, he doesn't get to continue to play if you're bad for 2 years. And Hurts is kind of in the same way. Like, because he was a second-round pick, if this team doesn't do anything, it's over, right? It's already over. But they're winning games. Look, this roster is nasty. This roster was nasty on offense. And there's no other way to put it. Like, it is top to bottom the best roster on offense in the NFL this season. Hurts did some stuff that I think adds to that. Being able to run your zone read stuff, your option stuff was great. Other quarterbacks can't do that. Gardner Minshew can do that. Made smart decisions with the football, didn't put the ball in harm's way. But again, it's like, okay, well, you just kind of threw the ball up to your big time receivers, and a lot of stuff was schemed open to the outside. And it's like, well, I said the same thing. It's like, what happens when you're under pressure a lot? Because his pocket ability is okay, but there's a lot of him leaving clean pockets, right? And it's like, okay, maybe that works because he has the legs as Jalen Hurts, but like, what if the pressure is a little more intense, right? Because you don't have Kelsey and Mailata and Lane Johnson and all these guys, right? So I obviously he's going to get paid a lot of money, but he's not there yet in terms of just trying. And look, I'm everyone tries to isolate quarterbacks in their own way. I'm doing it in my own way. I don't think he's there yet as this like elite quarterback. I know people saying he's like a top 5 quarterback, top 10 quarterback. I don't see that. However, he's going to have the chance to keep developing and keep becoming a better quarterback, which I think is great for him, because we've seen this guy just become a real player over the course of his, since he became the starting quarterback at Alabama. It's just gets better every year. So like there's hope, and I think like he can develop into the quarterback we want him to be, and he's going to get that chance. So I'm happy for him. You love watching this guy play. Like I'm such a fan of how he conducts himself and all that stuff. So he throws a really smooth ball, a nice spiral. Like you like watching him play. Lord. I just think that the play is not as good as I think like the stats and everything would show.
I'm just glad the smoothness of his balls is something that does not miss, does not escape your analysis. You're really thorough with that, but that's why we love you. I still have no idea if you think that he's worth that amount of money, but
and you'll never know.
What a non-answer. You should be a politician. Because I felt like I just was given such an in-depth response, but then clouded in that was that you just didn't even answer my question.
Yeah. And that's it.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk some free agents here. So, Brad, would you kind of give us a sort of lay of the land in terms of, I woke up from my Super Bowl hangover and I'm kind of trying to figure out like, what the hell should I expect to happen? What do we know that, or what is kind of known within league sources that maybe the public is not thinking about or knows about? I think everyone's heard like Derek Carr something, Aaron Rodgers something, but kind of give us a little crash course in free agency.
Yeah, I think the first big domino is going to be Derek Carr. Obviously now officially a free agent, and the quarterback dominoes are obviously the first ones to fall. I still think the New Orleans Saints are in the lead there. They just didn't want to give up draft compensation, and Carr has no reason to appease his former team and help them do that. So I think that's the big one. I think once that happens, it then probably solidifies Aaron Rodgers. I know you never should look at betting markets for player movement, but Rodgers' odds going from, I want to say plus 350 to be a Raider to now minus 350 to be a Raider, I actually do think is the correct market movement in that scenario. And then beyond that, I mean, it's not a top-heavy class, but the reason I like it is, unlike in years past, like our number 3 free agent is Javon Hargrave, the Eagle we were just talking about. The Eagles are going to have to spend a ton of money. I'm sure they prioritize Hargrave, and like Seth mentioned, they brought in a bunch of other interior defenders. They might not be able to keep him. He's going to get a really, really big deal. Jesse Bates, our 4th free agent, is not going to be a Cincinnati Bengal. Jamel Dean, our number 5 free agent, is not going to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. So for me, look, there's not a ton of major names, but I think all those guys are going to actually be free agents.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Seth, you are a noted Saints fan. How do you feel about DC?
It's going to be another non-answer here. But
so we'll move next question.
He's hedging in case he does become a Saint, and then he has to pivot and like point a bunch of his positives out, and he can't have a scathing review pre-DC DA reunion is my guess.
How smooth?
Yeah. I don't want to get blocked on Twitter.
How smooth are his balls? Yeah. Let's start there.
I think we've never seen Derek Carr with a good defense, like never, like, and not even just like a good average defense. We've only ever seen him with like the worst defenses you've ever seen in your life. And I do think that skews partly the narrative about him. I'm not saying it skews how he is as a quarterback, but it does skew partly the narrative of who this guy is. And the Saints have obviously had a great defense for the last, since like 2017, basically. I will say that like I am waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it's like eventually this defense just gets old. Cameron Jordan's not going to be the same player he used to be like that. That's probably not going to happen. They've hit on some draft picks, especially at corner, which I'm happy about. Looks like they hit on some linebackers too. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the defense just continues to be good. because they have hit on some good players recently. So he'll have that in New Orleans. I always look at Derek Carr and I'm like, man, he makes a lot of good decisions. He really does. And he throws the ball pretty hard, and he's got a good enough arm, and he moves okay in the pocket. He's gotten better at like not kind of just like falling down when guys are near him. And he's gotten better at taking shots down the field, and he'll have good players for sure with, Olave and Rashid Shaheed and those guys. So like, that's going to be good. The offensive line is a little bit of a question mark, but it'll be better than he's had with the Raiders for the past 3-4 years. So that's all good. I think the Derek Carr thing is always the same, which is like, you watch him, you're like, why isn't this guy the best quarterback? Or why isn't the guy like part of the elite tier of quarterbacks? And it's because when you're like Patrick Mahomes, when you're Brady, whatever, you're grading well, you're playing at an elite level 8 out of every 10 plays. Carr does it 6 out of every 10 plays. Mitchell Trubisky does it like 5 out of every 10 plays, 4.5. Okay,
Hey.
all right, sorry, apologies. But like this is the issue where it's like it's so close. You can go watch 2 games. You'll see like you watch one game and you're like, oh, this guy's an elite quarterback, and then you watch the next game and like half of it he's like not seeing the field. I mean, I always go back to the thing where they lost to the Rams on Thursday Night Football this year. The amount of money I had on the Raiders just to get a W, basically. And they're up, but they're not looking good. I mean, they're up like 17-3, but Carr is like looking bad. And going into that game for like 3-4 games, Carr had looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes out against the Rams defense that was missing a ton of starters, wasn't very good, and he can't see anything. And you're like, what's going on, man? So I think that's really always going to be my concern with Carr. It's like it's like 6 out of 10. 6 really, really good, smart plays, and 4 where you're like, what the hell? And where it's like, with Brady, it's with Breeze, who was the former Saints quarterback, it's 8.5 out of 10 are really, really great plays. And even the 1.5 that aren't great, they're not head scratchers. They're like, oh yeah, okay, maybe just missed a little bit. So I don't know. That's my answer.
At least, in his game in the Superdome this year, he's obviously very familiar with New Orleans. He played so well. He got across midfield one time in the entire outing. So all jokes aside, though, Dennis Allen obviously knows the guy very well. Maybe he knows all his weaknesses and knows how to work around those weaknesses, because it sure looked like that in New Orleans. But yeah, the free agent landscape otherwise, I think that is the theme, is that the guys are not elite, but again, Mike McGlinchey, I think, is going to become a free agent. Like Caleb McGarry, Juwan Taylor, like a lot of these guys that I know they're maybe not the sexiest names, but I think your team could actually sign them, which makes it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting.
I love Juwan.
What do you think?
Juwan Taylor was great, man, this year.
Yeah, he was very good. It like made a market difference for that team. You could tell it in the playoff run as well. Back to Derek Carr for just a second. What do you think he gets, Brad? And then what is like the next, what chain reaction does that set off? Like, are there, what do you think is kind of okay, Derek Carr signs with the Saints for X, and then what impact does that have on other things?
Yeah, so the big thing there, and I promise this isn't like a cop-out answer, but it's so tough with quarterbacks because it's really like how many bidders are there, and then are any of these bidders going to give him a deal strong enough to where he wouldn't just say, I'll take a 1-year flyer and try to earn a substantial multi-year deal after that. So my guess is that is where it goes, unless the Saints and other teams, the Jets, the Buccaneers, whoever starts bidding and moving this up. My guess is he'll instead go with like a 1-year 25-er in New Orleans and just see if he can parlay that into something else. The chain reaction is, for me, first that happens, I then think we'll get clarity on Aaron Rodgers, because I think it's between the Jets and the Raiders at this point. And so if Carr goes to neither of those teams, I think that gets interesting. If Carr, let's say, does go to the Jets, then maybe the Raiders can, bid a little bit less to get Aaron Rodgers, which is interesting. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, is a future Jet if Derek Carr is not. And then I think beyond that, it's okay. The rest of the NFC South, look, I think Carolina and Atlanta probably want to go in the draft, but are they potential destinations for your Baker Mayfield, your Jacoby Brissett's? Like, your bridge veteran guys. And I think I think the NFC South for all those players kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Jimmy G, Jets. That's interesting. So is that saying?
I just don't think Rodgers. Look, I know they hired Nathaniel Hackett and all these things and yada yada yada. I don't know if Rodgers wants to go to the Jets to end his career and pull a true Brett Favre. I think the Raiders are going to make a guy just like go over the top and just say, hey, come play with an elite receiving core. And not as much scrutiny and pressure as New York and all those things, and that'll probably get over the top.
Geno Smith is number 2 in your free agency rankings at quarterback, which you can see on PFF.com, by the way. What do you think ends up happening there? Really interesting because the Seahawks have a top 5 pick, right? They've been very shrewd about the way that they've managed their assets here. And there's plenty of quarterbacks in this draft. What do you think happens there?
Yeah, so I have been Geno pilled by Seth and some other film folks. So obviously he graded super well for us, and I do watch film for all these guys. I of course defer to our graders and to things I learn from the true film analysts, but I do go watch them and look at strengths, weaknesses, stuff like that. But for me with him, the thing is, it's again more about the market. He has $15 million in career earnings. So my deal projected right now is basically just Ryan Tannehill's deal, but brought forward. And I think it was too generous because Ryan Tannehill signed his deal when he had about $78 million in career earnings. So I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to make him a fair offer. I would say a 3-year deal, maybe a 4-year deal for still above $30 million, maybe 32.5, 35. I have it at 37.5, and I've been told it's a little bit generous. But I think the thing is, to the draft, I'm not sure it precludes them still maybe making a move. I wouldn't rule it out that Carroll says, yeah, you know what? I really like one of these kids, but I think he is a guy that needs a year, maybe a year and a half on the bench. We'll give Geno a deal where the first 2 years are really where all the guarantees are, and then we can kind of start this process. And maybe, Seth, you think I'm crazy for saying that, but I wouldn't be shocked if not. I think they're going to try to trade down. If there's a team, let's say like Carolina or Atlanta or Tennessee at 11, I've heard is more in these phone calls than I think people realize. If they maybe can get a trade down from 5, we know John Schneider loves to trade down, and maybe get an extra first rounder for 2024, and then maybe then that's like, you definitely take your guy and replace him. So that's how I see that playing out.
Yeah,
Seth,
oh yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm happy to hear your Geno thoughts.
That to me is more interesting if you can get that first round next year. So you have another year of Geno activity to decide from. My thing with the Geno and them taking a quarterback at 5 or if they like a guy there, it's just like Geno's kind of young, right? For a NFL player, 32, he'll turn 33 in the middle of next season. That's old. But for a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of hits on him, who hasn't played a lot of snaps, you get him for 3 years. Let's say another 2 years, let's say, of this level of play that we just saw, with the offensive tackles continuing to improve from rookies, and then you're adding potentially a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter in the draft. You're adding whatever you take in the first round, plus whatever other picks you got from your own draft and the Broncos down the line. Like, all of a sudden, you have a really good team. Right, like you fix that defense with some better personnel. Maybe finding that third receiver, maybe finding that tight end that worked better than Fant did. Though I think there's probably still some space there for Fant to carve out. But all of a sudden, you're in as a contender. If this is the Geno, I believe this is the Geno. So obviously, this is my, my projection is based on that, but. Yeah, I think, man, just kind of go all in and see and Pete Carroll, man, he's 70, 72, whatever. Like, this is not a lot of time left for him to develop Will Levis,
One thing, I don't want to stay on this 1 point too long, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but we're staying in the top 10. So if Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are not there, which I kind of don't think they are, if you're at 5, what do you do there personally?
Yeah, then it's a little different. Like, I think I really like I think there's other top 10 players. I don't know the whole draft yet. I haven't watched everyone. I really like the Tyree Wilson, the defensive end out of Texas Tech. I think he's a top 10 player. Is he top 5? It's borderline. So yeah, I think that would be the concern. But do you think, I guess my question back to you is like, are there 3 quarterbacks going in the top 5?
So my guess as of today would be that Bryce Young goes first or second. If Houston, then I think the Colts at 4 or trade up are a lock. I then wonder if, Arizona sitting at 3, Seattle sitting at 5. Does Carolina feel the need to move up? I guess maybe, yeah. I guess in that scenario, you get the Bears take one of those guys. It's 3 quarterbacks, and then it's the other goes to Seattle. So yeah, I guess that is a very feasible scenario.
That's kind of like the best scenario for the Seahawks. If we're living in the world where they really believe in Geno and they think this is going to carry forward, then yeah, I think that's the best scenario.
It's really interesting. And by the way, because of technical difficulties, Arjun not able to join us today. So we're going to condense draft talk into this, because we talked about the first overall pick on Sunday, and Jalen Carter on FanDuel was 5-1 to go first overall. I believe he was plus 650 on DraftKings. And really, what the Bears do impacts what happens to the Seahawks there quite a bit, right? Because if the Bears decide we're going to stand pat and then we're not going to take a quarterback, it all of a sudden slides value down the board, right? Now, all of a sudden, the number 2 pick is the number 1 overall pick. Number 3 pick is number 2 overall pick. And so now you're sitting there in a situation as the Seahawks where you have a lot more moves that you can make. There's a lot more value potentially from a trade down situation. It's almost unfathomable for me to think about the Bears staying at 1 and taking Jalen Carter. I'm assuming, Seth, that you think that's unfathomable as well, that could actually happen.
I'm hopeful that they get Jalen Carter, but you might as well get another pick with it, right? Like that's how it has to go down.
So here's the thing. If you stay at 1, and I know people hate this, but if you stay at 1, if you can't trade out at 1, just take Bryce Young. That is the only move. It would be like saying this: you've got $1 million, not $1 million. You're at a car dealership. You have a Ferrari already in the garage. Okay. And the car dealer comes and goes, "It's your lucky day. I'm going to give you a Ferrari for free." And you go, "You know what? I actually don't want the Ferrari. I would really love that 5-year-old used Jeep." Like, you might really want a Jeep. You might really need a Jeep. You might really want to go off-roading, but you're an idiot if you don't just take the Ferrari, right? Because ultimately it has much, much higher value. You can always resell it and acquire the Jeep that you need if you're in a situation where, where that arises. Brad, what is more likely, that they take Jalen Carter at 1 or they take Bryce Young at 1?
So I would still say if they cannot get a trade to happen, I think they would just take Jalen Carter. And look, I'm not, we talk a lot about overconfidence in the draft, and I get all that. If this was Caleb Williams or Drake May, I think your point would be entirely valid. Does a Bryce Young carry value into year 2, where I'm sure some teams right now are already poking holes in the fact that him and Mina Kimes are the same height on Twitter and things like that. Yeah. So again, the overall general sentiment is fair. And look, I'm not going to call it a disaster scenario. It's not a great scenario. But at that point, like, do you keep both? It's a whole thing. I think they'll just take Jalen Carter, honestly.
It's never ridiculous idea.
It's never bad to have good players. Jalen Carter projects as a very good player. So but again, they got to trade out of it. There's too many quarterbacks in the show. This isn't last year. There's too many quarterbacks. The only thing I'll say, Brad, to your point about scattering quarterbacks is I love Drake May. I love Caleb Williams. We're going to talk about them the same way we talked about every quarterback when it's their draft year. Like, we're going to poke holes in them. We're going to find ways. I love Caleb Williams, man. Oh my God. I can't wait. Can't wait to watch him again this year at USC. But we are going to poke a ton of holes in him in a year from now.
No, that's great. Entirely fair. That's entirely fair.
Seth has let us know about the smoothness of balls and is now poking holes. as well. So it's just been a really well-rounded podcast from Seth.
Are we still sponsored by Manscaped or?
Yeah, non-answers everywhere. I'm looking forward to when you've thoroughly scouted all of the smoothness of of all the quarterbacks in the draft, and we can ask you a little bit more on that. For now, head to pff.com, check out the draft guide. It is by far the best source of information on the draft that you can possibly have. Each and every one of us looks at it whenever we're trying to figure out some information on the draft. So go check that out. Follow Seth at PFF_Seth on Twitter, and Brad at PFF_Brad. Join the Printing Press Discord. Take advantage. Will there be a this year? You know, the person that let us know that was going, when he was going, I'll give you a hint. He's somewhere around this podcast. Okay. So if you want that same insight, go to the Printing Press Discord, and you'll be able to capitalize as well. Gentlemen, love you both. Peace.